still rejoice. You can still rejoice. Glad to see my little cousin. I had decided what I was going to preach about for the next several Sundays. I even mapped it out, get me another series going. And then I realized the other day that wasn't going to work, at least for this Sunday. So as I was looking over some sermons that I previously preached, some texts that I previously used, I ran across a sermon, a text from some time back that grabbed my attention. And the text of that sermon grabbed my attention and held on so tenaciously, I think, because of the current situation in which we find ourselves today. Gasoline prices are outrageous. I didn't think I'd ever been wishing to find some $2.50 a gallon gas. That would be a bargain, wouldn't it? I never shall forget when I was in college, I came back home one weekend and I think gas had moved up from about 18 cents to 21 cents a gallon, and I was so ticked off and mad I didn't know what to do. Gas had gone up that high. My God, I was filling my tank right after I had bought an old Buick or something and filled up my tank. That's when, right after I started teaching, bought an old used car, Buick, and the self-service stuff was just coming out into play, and I was just letting it run, and I was running off at the mouth, and I looked over, the thing was up to $9. Oh, let me hurry up and shut this thing off. $9 worth of gas in a car. My God, $9 now won't ever get you around the corner. Nearly everybody you know is experiencing some kind of stress. Let me ask you a question. Be honest now. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to be identified. But let me ask you this question. How many of you are experiencing feelings of frustration and anxiety over the social, political, and economic financial situations around you? Have you ever felt like you were running out of gas, running on empty? Life can be draining. Involvement in church ministries can even be draining. It's a great relief, however, to discover that we're not the only ones in history who've ever faced this draining situation. Our Bible heroes were often filled with the same anxieties and stress situations as we are. The Old Testament prophet Habakkuk was a troubled soul. He wanted to know why bad things so often happen to good people. He had a lot of questions, but he got few answers. And life is often that way, isn't it? There are plenty of questions, but not enough satisfying answers. Habakkuk was crying out for answers, but God seemingly was not supplying. Habakkuk was crying out for answers, but God seemingly was not supplying any answers. Habakkuk began to wonder if God were even there. Have you ever cried out to God when bad things were happening in your life? When bad things were happening in the lives of your children or your loved ones, you cried out and no answer came? Did you begin to wonder if God is even there? When there's no heavenly intervention when we pray, we're tempted to think either God is not there, or if he's there, he doesn't care. Unanswered prayer or perceived unanswered prayer is a big problem. You see, whenever we cry out, is God there? Does God care? And there's nothing but silence, the human heart dies a little in despair. Now, maybe some of you you have never been there. Maybe some of you have always been satisfied with everything that's been going on in your life. But if you've ever called out to God, you know, and all this stuff these folk tell you, you know, when you call out, when you cry out, before you can get through praying, he done answered your prayer. Well, you prayed a long time and he ain't got there yet with your answer. If you've ever been there, maybe you know what I'm talking about. But wait a minute. There's another side to this matter of prayer. What if God does respond to our prayer, but we don't like the answer? That was the situation with Habakkuk. After engaging in persistent and earnest prayer, Habakkuk began to hear the Lord's voice clearly, but he didn't like what he heard. God was saying to Habakkuk, if you think what's happening now is tough, Habakkuk, just wait. Just wait till the Chaldeans arrive on the scene. You think it's bad now. You think $3.50 gas is bad. Just wait until it gets to $4 a gallon. And you ain't working 40 hours a week, you're working 30 hours a week. That's what God was saying. The Chaldeans were not among the favorite people of Habakkuk. They were enemies of Habakkuk. They were enemies of Israel. God himself had described the Chaldeans as a ruthless, feared, and dreadful people. So now, Habakkuk had an entirely new set of questions. Why would God use the unholy to punish the holy? Now there's something in that. Why would God use the unholy to punish the holy? You know, as if Israel was all holy. There's something in that. Why would God allow these ungodly folk to treat America so bad? That might get on the internet and they might start doing me like they did Jeremiah Wright. So I got to watch what I say right here. So I don't want to mess up Mr. Obama. Am I making sense to anybody? Sometimes when we think that we are the holy ones, that we're all in line with God, maybe we are not as in line with God as we thought we were. Bind you, devil. Turn that squelch or something down a little bit on that thing. I don't know. I guess I was too close to it. It just didn't seem. Habakkuk was wondering why God would use the unholy to punish the holy. It just didn't seem like the kind of thing that a God of love and justice would do. Let me ask you a question. What happens when you and God disagree on how to handle a situation? Now, I know some of you in here, you never disagreed with God. You're running around telling that lie. Anything that God does is all right with me. You're living in denial. Yeah, you're living in denial. Nobody agrees with anybody all the time. And if you agree with any and everybody all the time, something wrong with you. You need to go check yourself. You ain't thinking. Let's see what Habakkuk eventually did. Listen to what he said at chapter 2 and verse 1. Habakkuk said, I will climb my watchtower now and wait to see what answer God will give to my complaint. Did you notice that Habakkuk's attitude is beginning to change? Habakkuk was maturing spiritually. He stopped asking God so many questions and came to the point of of embracing God's answer. Let me tell y'all something today. Spiritual maturity is not marked by how often you shout. Spiritual maturity is not marked by how often you come to church and how much money you put in the offering plate. Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. Habakkuk stopped asking God so many questions and started embracing God's answer. Even though he wanted God to explain the situation to him, he came to a point where he was able to start embracing God's will.